podcast. What makes you smarter? It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, DJLittleRock.com. You know where to go. Check availability, get a free price quote, and maybe you can have me at your next event. You know I like to party with the people. The people need to be entertained. Let me entertain you. Why won't you? Why don't you? Please let me have the honor. You know, I'm booking a lot of weddings lately, and I'm so excited about that. My goodness, we're starting to break out of this COVID-19 coronavirus thing, this quarantine. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I know you probably don't like it too much either, wearing masks all over the place, but we do what we have to do to protect ourselves, to protect each other. And just follow what the scientists say. You know, I'm sure they know much more than I do, for sure. All right, this week's shows, I'll be at the Rab in Conway, Arkansas on Friday night, my usual Friday night gig, 8 p.m. till 1 a.m., video dance party, karaoke jam. Yeah, I said karaoke. You're the stars of the show. If you sing in the shower, if you sing in the car, you could sing on stage right there at the Rab. Full bar, kitchens open, pool tables, pool tournament on Friday nights. So get involved with that. There's always something fun to do at the Rab. Friday nights, 8 p.m. Be there. On Saturday night, well, I have a wedding. I'm so stoked about that. Yeah, and unless you're invited, you can't come. Sorry. So my only public show will be at the Rab. Friday night, be there. Also, if you'd like to tell your story or hear the stories of others, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Now, on with the show. Today on the program, 10 things you need to know today for Thursday, September 24th, 2020. 10 things you need to know today. Number 1, ex-Louisville officers not charged for shooting Breonna Taylor. A grand jury has indicted an officer involved in the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor in her Louisville home, but the former Louisville police officer, Brett Hankinson, was charged with endangering lives in a neighboring apartment when he fired indiscriminately, not for the 5 shots that hit Taylor. Ben Crump, an attorney for Taylor's family, tweeted that it was, quote, outrageous and offensive, end quote. Nobody was charged for killing Taylor, a black emergency medical worker. Hankinson and 2 other officers forced their way into Taylor's Louisville home in a March 13th raid. Taylor's boyfriend, fearing intruders, fired his gun, and the officers responded with a flurry of gunfire. The other officers were not charged. 2 officers were shot in unrest after the indictment. Authorities took a suspect into custody. This is according to NBC News and the Washington Post. Number 2, GOP-led committee finds no wrongdoing by Biden in Ukraine. The Republican-led Senate Homeland Security Committee said in a report released Wednesday that it found no improper influence or wrongdoing by Joe Biden in his Ukraine dealings as vice president. Committee Chair Ron Johnson, Republican Wisconsin, had hoped to prove Biden's, quote, unfitness for office, end quote, as election day approaches. But he conceded the investigation found no, quote, massive smoking guns, end quote, regarding Biden or his son, Hunter Biden. The younger Biden served on the board of the Ukrainian energy company Burisma while his father was leading U.S.-Ukraine policy as vice president. The investigation concluded that Hunter Biden, quote, cashed in, end quote, on his father's name and created an, quote, awkward, end quote, situation for U.S. diplomats. The Trump campaign called the report, quote, explosive, end quote. Biden's campaign accused Johnson of trying to reinforce a Russian disinformation campaign against Biden. This is according to the New York Times. Number 3, Ginsburg honored in Supreme Court ceremony. Members of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's family, her fellow justices, and her former law clerks gathered at the Supreme Court on Wednesday to honor her as a pioneer for women's rights and a judge of enduring influence. Chief Justice Justice John Roberts noted in an 18-minute ceremony that Ginsburg had wanted to be an opera singer but pursued law, then faced gender discrimination at law school on the job before becoming one of the nation's leading fighters against discrimination. Roberts said Ginsburg's 483 opinions, majority, congruum, and dissenting, would, quote, steer the court for decades, end quote, to come. After the ceremony, Ginsburg's casket was moved to the building's portico, where members of the public could pay their respects. Ginsburg died last week at 87. On Friday, she will be the first woman to lie in state in the Capitol. This is according to CNN and the New York Times. Number 4, Wolf. White supremacist pose most lethal domestic security threat. White supremacists have become the, quote, most persistent and lethal, end quote, domestic security threat in the United States. Chad Wolf, acting Homeland Security Secretary, told senators on Wednesday. Wolf's assessment came despite repeated statements by President Trump and Attorney General William Barr depicting, quote, left-wing, end quote, extremists rioting over racial injustice as the nation's biggest internal security threat. Despite a series of racially motivated attacks last year, Trump said he didn't consider, quote, white nationalism, end quote, to be a growing problem. Wolf, whom Trump has nominated to officially become the department's secretary, was accused earlier this month by a whistleblower of downplaying the threat of white supremacists. Wolf rejected the allegations during his Wednesday confirmation hearing, calling it, quote, patently false, end quote, and, quote, a fabrication, end quote. This is according to Bloomberg and Reuters. Number 5, Johnson & Johnson starts phase 3 trial of single-shot coronavirus vaccine. Johnson & Johnson announced on Wednesday it has launched the third and final phase of trials for its coronavirus vaccine candidate. Johnson & Johnson's drug is the fourth vaccine candidate to start phase 3 trials in the United States, but the first that would be administered in a single injection. Experts said a vaccine requiring just one dose would prove advantageous when it comes to getting it out to as many people as possible. Quickly, Johnson & Johnson CEO Alex Gorsky called the new trial stage, which will involve up to 60,000 participants, a, quote, pivotal milestone, end quote. The company said that if the vaccine proves to be safe and effective, it's expecting that, quote, the first batches, end quote, could be, quote, available for emergency use authorization in early 2021, end quote. This is according to the Washington Post. Number 6, Newsom bans sale of new gas-powered cars in California by 2035. California Governor Gavin Newsom, Democrat, signed an executive order Wednesday requiring all cars sold in the state to be zero emission by 2035. The order focuses on new car sales, so people will be able to keep or sell their gas-powered cars after 2035. The order was part of the state's effort to boost electric vehicles in the nation's biggest automobile market and fight pollution. California's transportation sector is responsible for more than half of carbon pollution in the state, Newsom said, and increasing carbon emissions have contributed to climate change and worsening wildfire seasons. Quote, our cars shouldn't make wildfires worse and create more days filled with smoky air, end quote, Newsom said. The Trump administration slammed the order as overreach. Quote, this is yet another example of how extreme the left has become, end quote, White House spokesman Judd Deere said. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. Number 7, Trump refuses to commit to peaceful transfer of power if he loses. President Trump on Wednesday refused to commit to a peaceful transition of power if he loses the November election. Quote, we're going to have to see what happens, end quote, Trump said. Quote, I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster, end quote. More people are expected to use mail-in ballots in the general election because of the coronavirus pandemic, and Trump has repeatedly made baseless claims that this will lead to voter fraud to benefit Democrats. Quote, get rid of the ballots, end quote, Trump said. And there will be, quote, a very peaceful, there won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation, end quote, he said. Senator Mitt Romney, Republican Utah, said it was, quote, unthinkable and unacceptable, end quote, for a president to suggest he might not respect something so, quote, fundamental to democracy, end quote. This is according to CNN. Number 8, ex-NSC official says White House falsely accused Bolton of revealing secrets. A former National Security Council official filed a letter in federal court on Wednesday accusing White House officials of trying to block former National Security Advisor John Bolton from releasing his best-selling memoir by falsely claiming it contained classified information. The former official, Ellen Knight, oversaw pre-publication review of Bolton's book in April cleared it for its planned June 23rd publication. Her lawyer said the process was then, quote, commandeered by political appointees seemingly for a political purpose, end quote, resulting a Justice Department lawsuit to block the publication. Knight also claimed it was reassigned after refusing to sign a false statement to be used in the lawsuit. The Justice Department said the letter merely proved that, quote, Bolton did not receive the appropriate and required written pre-publication approval, end quote. This is according to Reuters. Number 9, Eric Trump must testify in fraud case before election. A New York State judge on Wednesday ordered President Trump's son, Eric Trump, to answer questions under oath in a fraud investigation before the presidential election. Last week, Eric Trump's lawyers said he was prepared to give a deposition in the inquiry into the Trump family real estate business, but they argued the interview should be done after the vote, citing their client's, quote, extreme travel schedule, end quote, and concerns that the interview could be used, quote, for political purposes, end quote. The judge, Arthur Engoron, said those arguments were, quote, unpersuasive, end quote, giving Trump until October 7th to testify. State Attorney General Letitia James is investigating whether President Trump and his company committed fraud by inflating the value of assets to qualify for loans and tax benefits. This is according to the New York Times. Number 10, NFL Hall of Fame running back Gale Sayers dies at 77. Gale Sayers, the Chicago Bears' legendary running back, died Wednesday. He was 77. Sayers had been living with dementia, which his wife previously suggested was partially a result of his football career. On the gridiron, Sayers was considered one of the best running backs in the NFL has ever seen, particularly when he got out into the open field. Sayers was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1977 at just 34 years old. Off the field, Sayers was known for being a great teammate and the friendship he developed with his Bears backfield mate, Brian Piccolo. Sayers, who was black, and Piccolo, who was white, became roommates after the Bears dropped their policy of segregating players by race for hotel room assignments. Their friendship was depicted in the 1971 film Brian's Song. This is according to the Associated Press. That's 10 things you need to know today for Thursday, September 24th, 2020. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for putting up with my stumbling. I'm just trying to fill my head with knowledge, and while I have this broadcast equipment sitting here in front of me, might as well let you in on it as well. But if I'm the only source of news that you have for the day, don't make me the only source of news for you. Make this like an addendum, something to start the conversation rolling, if you will. Like, subscribe, all that kind of thing. It helps me get up higher on the algorithms. So yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for this. Thank you for being a part of the What Makes You Smarter podcast. Also, speaking of being a part of a podcast, if you'd like to tell your story or hear the stories of others, I encourage you to check out my other podcast, What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Also, if you'd like to watch me stream some games online, I'm learning how to play these video games. Video games, you say? Yeah, video games. And you can look for me using the hashtag KeysDAN Gaming. And you can find me on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook Gaming. Hashtag KeysDAN Gaming. That's it for me. It's KeysDAN, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here.